We are now discovering certain legislative points on German wines and also a bit certain styles of winemaking. So the fundamental principle of German wine is the classification of grapes according to their must weight at harvest. So the sugar level at harvest indicates or gives reference to the later quality. This system is in principle, the case for all quality levels achievable by any German vintner. So as soon as you are in one of the 13 German wine growing regions, you have the possibility on whatever side you have to produce a quality wine, but then it's the sugar level of the grapes that is defining in what so-called predicate you are. Nevertheless, that system is now changing into a quality indication according to the Roman system, which is based on the origin, meaning that the smaller the indicated area is, the higher the quality, meaning single vineyard or side means higher quality. On the left-hand side, we see nevertheless the older German quality system, starting with Tafelwein or German wine, then Landwein, then it's Qualitätswein, always in combination with the region where it's coming from, and then it's going into the Prädikatswein system, starting with Kabinett, then it's Spätlese, Auslese, Beerenauslese, and on top Trockenbeerenauslese, and then furthermore ice wine. But what does this specifically mean? In this slide here, we have furthermore information for those more or less 4 different categories, starting with wine or German wine, meaning that 100% of the grapes you use are from German territory. The minimum must weight, also indicated here as natural must weight, depending on the variety, is comparatively low. You are allowed to enrich, chaptalizing, increasing the alcohol. The minimum alcohol content here is 8.5. The total alcohol content maximum is 15%, and you get it in all sweetness levels. While you have a Landwein, you are indicating a certain region. 85% of the grapes have to come from the indicated region. The minimum sugar level of the grapes, and therefore the later on potential alcohol, is also quite low, depending what variety we have. Here as well, an enrichment is possible. Minimum alcohol content is 8.5. And once more, the total alcohol content maximum 15%. And you can get this in dry and semi-dry. Qualitätswein is then indicating the wine growing region. You get 100% from that region as a necessary. Depending on the variety, you are from 55 degree Oechsle to 72 degree Oechsle. An enrichment here is possible. The minimum alcohol content is 7%. And yeah, you can get it in all sweetness levels. And for Qualitätswein, once more, you are allowed to increase the alcohol content. That's not the case for Prädikatswein. Prädikatswein, where we have that Kabinett, Spätlese, Auslese, etc. An enrichment, an alcohol increase by chaptalization or by concentration technically is not allowed. The minimum alcohol content present in the product is just 5.5% due to very super sweet wines like a Beerenauslese or a Trockenbeerenauslese, where the yeast, due to the excessive sugar levels, struggles to ferment that far. And the sweetness levels, a Prädikatswein can be dry, but it can also be very sweet. The German wine label might look for you quite mysterious, but it's worth discovery. So first of all, we have the label of a Qualitätswein. The grapes must come from one of the 13 wine growing regions. In that example here, it is Rheinhessen, and it is to be labeled. So even though it says Deutscher Qualitätswein here, the information Rheinhessen means it's from Rheinhessen. All styles of wine with a minimum of 7% alcohol by volume are possible. So we also can have here sweeter wines. Wines under Qualitätswein level and above must go through laboratory analysis and as a blind tasting. And this is the proof that this wine is a wine by quality in the class and not by its origin per se. Okay, so your wine that is labeled as a Qualitätswein and all other categories in terms of predicate system above have to go to a mandatory sensory analysis of a blind tasting panel of minimum 4 or 5 tasters. And if you pass there, you get the so-called AP number. The amtliche Prüfnummer indicates that the wine passed the sensory test, and the number furthermore is having certain codes. It refers to the region, it refers to the body of panelists or the group of panelists that tested the wine, and it's furthermore a lot number of the bottler. So with that, you can also trace back the wine to a certain extent. The grapes for Prädikatswein must come from one of that 13 different wine growing regions, what we call in German Anbaugebiet. The wines can be made in all styles, so from bone dry to residual sugar. The minimum alcohol level indicated is 7% volume, with exception of Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese. Same as Qualitätswein, this category requires the sensory evaluation in the class to pass. Wines that are denied due to having mistakes or not being typical for the region or the variety cannot go under the label of Prädikatswein and also not under the label of a Qualitätswein. And the Prädikat, as shown before, has 6 levels starting from Kabinett going up till Trockenbeerenauslese. And here once more you see the different minimum levels that you can find for Prädikatswein. And in terms of indicating sweetness, also important to know that wines with no more than 4 gram residual sugar are seen as dry, with an exception, because it can also go up to 9 gram for a dry wine, which might appear quite high, but here you have to take into account that we have wines with quite high acidity, so that when the acidity is 7 gram, you can have 2 grams more than the acidity, so meaning up to 9 gram, for example, for a Riesling are possible and still being indicated as dry. Halbtrocken or off-dry is counting for wines with residual sugar between 4 and 12 gram, or up to 18 gram, where the residual sugar does not exceed the total acidity by more than 10 gram, per liter. So here once more taking into account that we also have some wines, some varieties with higher acidity that can also handle a bit more residual sugar and not appearing so sweet. Lieblich or medium sweet is counting for wines between 12 to 45 gram per liter of residual sugar, and süß or sweet would mean that we have wines with more than 45 gram of residual sugar per liter. Another term that you might come along while it is about German wine, wine from Rheingau, wine from the Mosel, is the so-called Verband Deutscher Prädikatsweingüter, or as a shortcut, VDP. This board was founded in 1910 by a group of producers who wanted to promote wines made without must enrichment, and formerly they called it Naturweine, so natural wines, maybe. In the 1960s, the name of Naturweine was rejected by the German wine law. In 1971, the concept of Prädikatswein was introduced, and in response, VDP named itself and set up a new statute of higher standards for their members. Today, we have around 200 wineries. That number is a bit fluctuating. Some are accepted, some are leaving, and those members are across all German wine growing regions. The member can be identified by the logo that you see here on the left hand side on the capsule, and around about 5% of the German vineyard area goes back to those wineries, whereas they are just producing or just standing for 3% of annual German wine production, but 7.5% by its value. 1/5 of Germany's certified organic producers are a member of the VDP, and the number is increasing. They have stricter regulations regarding grape growing, winemaking, and they want to promote a bit more the quality. And each member is audited every 5 years, so that if the standard or the quality is not in line with their own standards, they might be forced to leave. They furthermore have a further categorization where it is about categorization quality by origin. They want to point out, like you have in the Roman system, the quality by the area. They want to point out a bit more the quality by the single site, and then the bottom level quality, it's the so-called Gutswein, just indicating the winery, then Ortswein indicating the area, and then they have so-called an Erste Lage and then a Große Lage for the superior or the highest quality possible, whereas they have further sensory tastings sometimes necessary to achieve that. What wine styles and what winemaking techniques do we see throughout Germany? Bulk wine still counts for a large production in many German wine growing areas. There are many small estates producing low volume, high quality wines, but there are also certain producers still going for bulk wine. Traditionally, wines were fermented and matured in large oak casks, like you see here on this picture. That's a typical barrel shape you see in Rheingau or in Rheinhessen. German oak, especially from Pfalz, is popular, particularly for those large vessels, whereas French oak is common for smaller barriques. The Mosel also had a traditional barrel shape that's round like a barrique, but it holds, this is called a Fuder, and it holds around about 1,000 liter. Those oval barrels that we see here on the picture, they are called Stück, and that indicates that it is a volume of 1200 liters. So comparatively big barrels. The idea is not to give oak flavor to the wines. Formerly, it was for new barrels, the idea to get the oak flavor out as quick as possible, not to have oak flavor overlapping or masking the typical varietal aromas from the wine. Recently, fermentation in stainless steel has become the norm. It is used for inexpensive wines in which temperature control is sought for controlled slow fermentations to occur. You can also work in big quantity, but also in small quantity. Nevertheless, for many wineries, the experiments are also being a part of their winemaking. So, like you're working with elongated lees contact, also partly oak fermentation, etc. So we are quite diverse here in terms of fermenting white wines, I would say. Yeah. Chaptalization or enrichment is been formerly a common practice in Germany. Nevertheless, climate change is also forcing us here in Germany to rethink common winemaking practices. So it is not just the case that we have enrichment taking place, which is possible in all German wine growing regions. Most German wine growing regions are in the European Zone A, here in red. The exception is Baden, that is in viticultural Zone B, like the majority of neighboring wine growing regions in France. So here also an alcohol increase is impossible, but not by 3% like we can do at the Mosel or in Rheingau. In Baden it is just 2%. Recently, deacidification is also legal. Nowadays, we are, without exception, also allowed to work on the acidity in Germany in terms of acidifying, in terms of increasing the acidity. Climate change is also working on our wine styles here, and it is also in terms of typicity achieving a bit higher acidity for us. In some vintages already a reason for concern that the acidity is too low. Even though at the Mosel drier wines are now increasingly being produced, the Mosel itself has a strong reputation for producing sweeter styles of wine in the ranges of Kabinett, Spätlese, and Auslese, and those wines are quite low, moderate in alcohol, have certainly defining residual sugar, but within high acidity, they are still well balanced, and I would say in that kind of category are a unique style of wine in the wine world. The winters were usually cold enough to produce ice wine here. Due to climate change, we see in the last decade more and more problems, even in that cooler areas, to produce in a targeted way ice wines. Mosel Rieslings are paler in color, lighter in body. They show lower alcohol and higher acidity than those from elsewhere. They have pronounced floral and green fruit aroma. As mentioned before, the balance of acidity and flavor intensity give these wines a potential for long bottle aging and then furthermore developing to an typical aged character for Rieslings. The Rheingau delivers slightly different wine styles from Riesling. The majority of these wines are made in a dry style. However, here we also have a reputation for wines with residual sugar based on botrytis wines. Noble sweet wines show quite elegant sweetness due to the concentration effect. Also acidity goes up, and we get a unique spectrum of flavors derived from botrytis. The classic Rheingau wine is a dry Riesling with a pronounced acidity and aromas of citrus fruits and smoke tinged minerality. Typical, they are more full-bodied than the wines from the Mosel. Their sugar is perfectly balanced and pronounced with a certain acidity, which makes it possible also to give those wines, or that those wines have a really long cellar life as well.